You felt it before. That quiet frustration that creeps in when you know the connection is there, the tension is real, the desire is almost tangible, and yet nothing happens. She's right there, close enough to feel, distant enough to lose. And you start wondering if you're missing something, some invisible switch inside her mind that you just can't seem to reach. Because no one ever tells you the truth. It's not about saying the right words. It's not about trying harder. And it's definitely not about chasing her attention like it's something you have to earn. What if the real reason she's not in the mood has nothing to do with mood at all? Welcome back to Psychology of Desire, where we explore the hidden forces shaping attraction, power, and the silent games people play without even realizing it. If you find yourself seeing your own story in these words, stay with me. You're going to want to hear this. Because the first shift, the one that changes everything, is something most men get completely wrong. You think attraction grows through presence, through effort, through being available, consistent, predictable. You believe that if you show up enough, if you care enough, if you give enough, she'll eventually meet you there. But what you don't see is how slowly, almost invisibly, that very consistency begins to numb her. Not because she doesn't like you, but because nothing about you feels uncertain anymore. Desire doesn't breathe in certainty. It suffocates in it. Think about the moments when she seemed the most drawn to you. It wasn't when you were trying to impress her. It wasn't when you were over-explaining your feelings or making everything clear. It was when she couldn't quite read you. When your attention felt selective, not guaranteed. When your silence said more than your words ever could. There's something deeply unsettling about not knowing where you stand with someone, and at the same time, deeply intoxicating. It creates a quiet tension in her mind, a loop she keeps replaying, trying to understand you, trying to feel you, trying to predict you. And that loop is where desire starts to grow. Because the human brain doesn't chase what it already understands, it chases what it almost understands. That's why pulling back, even slightly, changes everything. Not disappearing, not playing childish games, just becoming less available in a way that feels natural, not forced. You stop explaining yourself. You stop filling every silence. You let moments exist without rushing to control them. And suddenly, she starts leaning in. Not because you told her to, but because something in her feels like it might lose you. And loss, or even the possibility of it, has a strange way of awakening desire that comfort never could. You've seen it happen. When you're fully invested, she becomes distant. When you pull your energy back, she notices. Not always consciously, not always immediately, but emotionally, something shifts. Because attraction isn't built on logic, it's built on emotional contrast. Presence and absence, attention and withdrawal, certainty and doubt, too much of one, and the entire dynamic collapses. But here's the part that makes most people uncomfortable. This isn't manipulation, it's alignment with how people actually feel. Beneath the surface, beyond what they say out loud. Because she won't tell you that she's drawn to the version of you that feels slightly out of reach. She won't admit that mystery excites her more than reassurance. And she definitely won't say that sometimes. The less you try to put her in the mood, the more naturally it happens. But you've felt it. In the way her tone changes. In the way she starts watching you more closely. In the way her energy shifts. Without a single word being said. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because now it's no longer about chasing desire. It's about understanding the quiet psychological triggers that create it, without force, without effort, almost like it's happening on its own. And this is only the beginning, because what comes next is even more dangerous. Not because it's complicated, but because once you understand it, you'll realize how many times you've unknowingly killed attraction, right at the moment it was about to grow. You don't lose her interest in loud, obvious ways. It doesn't collapse in a dramatic argument or a clear rejection. It fades, quietly, in the moments you think you're doing everything right. That's the part no one warns you about. Because the second shift isn't about what you do. It's about what you reveal. Too soon, too completely, too predictably. You see, there's a fragile phase in attraction where everything is still forming, where emotions are fluid, undefined, almost searching for a shape. And in that phase, the fastest way to kill tension is to remove the mystery before it has time to breathe. You felt that urge, haven't you? That need to make things clear, to define where you stand, to express exactly how much you like her, to turn the unspoken into something solid, something safe. But the moment you do that, something shifts, not always visibly, not immediately, but internally. She stops wondering. And when she stops wondering, she stops feeling that quiet pull toward you. Because desire doesn't grow in clarity, it grows in anticipation, in the spaces between what is said and what is left unsaid. Think about the last time someone made you feel something intense. It wasn't because they explained everything perfectly. It was because there was something you couldn't fully figure out, something just out of reach, something that kept your mind returning to them when they weren't even there. That's not an accident. That's psychology. The brain craves completion. It wants to close loops, to solve emotional puzzles, and when you give her all the answers up front, you remove the very tension that keeps her engaged. You become predictable. And predictability feels safe, but it rarely feels exciting. So, when you tell her exactly how much you want her, when you over-communicate your intentions, when you remove every ounce of uncertainty, you think you're building connection. But what you're actually doing is lowering the emotional stakes. You're making it easy for her to relax into certainty instead of lean into curiosity. And curiosity is where desire lives. This is why the most powerful moments between you aren't the ones filled with words. They're the pauses, the eye contact that lingers just a second too long, the conversations that almost go somewhere deeper but stop right before they do. The subtle tension that builds when something is felt, but not fully expressed. That tension is everything, because it creates a question in her mind. What is this, really? And as long as that question exists, so does her emotional investment. But the moment you answer it too clearly, too directly, you collapse the entire experience into something defined, labeled, controlled. And controlled emotions don't burn. They fade. Now, here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Because this isn't about being distant or cold. It's about restraint, emotional discipline, the ability to feel something deeply and not rush to expose it. That's what creates presence. That's what creates depth. That's what makes her feel like there's more to you than what she can immediately access. And that feeling, that there's something beneath the surface she hasn't fully discovered yet, it pulls her in. Not logically, but instinctively. Because people don't chase what's given. They chase what feels just out of reach, but still possible. And when you learn to exist in that space, you stop trying to make her feel something and start allowing her to discover it on her own. But this is where most people fail. Because the next move, the one almost no one gets right, has nothing to do with mystery, nothing to do with silence. And everything to do with the way you make her feel when she's the one pulling closer. And if you misunderstand this part, you won't just lose the tension, you'll reverse it. There's a moment, subtle, almost invisible, where everything begins to turn. It's the moment she leans in, not physically, at least not at first, but emotionally. You feel it in the way her messages change, a little faster, a little warmer, in the way she starts asking more questions, not just to respond, but to understand you, in the way her attention lingers, even when there's no reason for it to. This is where most men think they've won. And that's exactly why they lose. Because the third shift isn't about pulling her in, it's about what you do when she's already there. You see, when she starts investing, when her curiosity turns into interest, when her energy begins to match yours, your instinct is to reward it, to give more. More attention, more validation, more reassurance. It feels natural, logical even. She's coming closer. So you meet her halfway. But attraction doesn't follow fairness, it follows tension. And the moment you mirror her energy too perfectly, something inside her relaxes in a way that quietly kills the spark. Because now there's no emotional climb, no subtle imbalance, no reason for her to lean in further, because you've already closed the distance for her. Desire needs space to move. And when you remove that space, even with good intentions, it has nowhere to go. So instead of pulling her deeper, you stabilize the dynamic too early. You turn something that was building into something that just exists. And existing doesn't create intensity. It creates comfort. Now, comfort isn't bad, but comfort without tension becomes forgettable. That's why the most magnetic people don't rush to match energy. They absorb it, acknowledge it, but they don't immediately return it in full. There's a slight delay, a subtle emotional gap, not enough to create distance, just enough to keep the current flowing. Think about it like this. When she reaches for you emotionally and you instantly give everything back, the moment ends. But when she reaches and there's just a fraction of you still out of reach, the moment stretches, it deepens, it lingers in her mind long after it's over. And that lingering is what turns interest into obsession. Because now, she's not just feeling you, she's thinking about you, replaying interactions, analyzing your tone, wondering what you're feeling, even when you're not saying it. That mental loop is where emotional attachment quietly forms. And here's the part most people never realize. You don't create that loop by giving more. You create it by holding just enough back, not in a cold way. Not in a manipulative way, but in a controlled, intentional way. You stay present, but not fully exposed. Engaged, but not completely available. Interested, but not entirely claimed. And that balance is what keeps her leaning in without ever feeling like she's reached the end. Because the moment she feels like she has all of you, the chase, emotional, psychological, instinctive, comes to a stop. And when the chase stops, so does the intensity. But if you maintain that slight distance, that quiet sense that there's always more beneath the surface, she doesn't just stay interested, she invests deeper, stronger, almost without realizing it. And that's where things begin to shift from attraction into something far more consuming. But here's where it gets dangerous, because the next move is the one that determines whether that emotional pull turns into genuine desire, so första shy, den dat die, or silent resistance. It's the difference between her opening up or slowly pulling away without ever telling you why, and almost no one sees it happening until it's too late. And this is where everything you thought you understood about desire starts to collapse into something far more precise and far more revealing. Because the final shift isn't about what you do to her at all. It's about what remains of you when she finally feels close enough to see clearly. You've been trained to think attraction is a sequence. Say the right thing, create the right tension, hold the right distance. But real emotional dynamics don't behave like instructions. They behave like mirrors. She doesn't just respond to your actions. She responds to your internal state, leaking through your behavior. And when she starts to feel that pull toward you, when the curiosity deepens, when the emotional space between you begins to shrink, she begins scanning for something most people overlook: consistency of identity. Not perfection, not dominance, not endless mystery, but emotional steadiness beneath the surface tension. Because if the version of you she is drawn to feels like a performance, the attraction begins to fracture. Slowly, quietly, without confrontation. You'll notice it in the smallest ways first. Shorter replies, less curiosity in her tone, a subtle emotional step back that she won't explain. And it won't happen because you did something wrong in a single moment. It will happen because the emotional experience stopped feeling alive and started feeling managed. That's the hidden edge no one talks about. You can understand tension, you can understand space, you can understand silence. But if it doesn't come from a grounded center in you, it becomes unstable. And instability is something she feels before she can name it. This is why the most powerful presence isn't the one that pushes or pulls. It's the one that stays emotionally anchored while everything around it shifts. When you're calm in your own desire, when you're not overreacting to her closeness or distance, when you're not trying to engineer every emotional moment. You stop chasing the outcome and start becoming the experience itself. That's when something strange happens. She stops evaluating you and starts feeling you, not as a puzzle to solve, but as an energy she naturally moves toward. And in that space, attraction doesn't feel like effort anymore. It feels inevitable. But here's the truth that sits underneath all of this. The part most people never want to accept. You were never really trying to put her in the mood. Der inkshak shar, bezakurti indar kar. You were trying to understand why something so natural sometimes feels so out of reach. And the answer was never about control. It was about awareness. Awareness of space, timing, emotional contrast, and the silent psychology that governs what people chase, what they resist, and what they return to again and again in their mind. Because once you see it clearly, you realize desire was never something you had to force. It was something you either interrupt, the anaksi, the indatsandaksai, or allow. And most people, without ever realizing it, interrupt it right at the moment it starts to grow. Not because they're wrong, but because they're afraid of losing what they haven't yet secured. And that fear, more than anything else, is what kills attraction before it ever has a chance to become real. This is psychology of desire, where we don't chase emotions. We decode them. And sometimes, what you learn here won't just change how you see her. Andakai. It will change how you see yourself in every moment you thought you were doing the right thing, while slowly undoing the very thing you wanted most. If this resonated with you, you already know what to do. Not because I'm asking, but because something in you doesn't want to stop here. Because now you've seen the pattern. And once you see it, endure to frange ti by, it doesn't leave you.